Lead people, manage processes. Don't manage people. I've laid awake at night thinking, oh my God, we need more business, we're barely scratching by. And then I've also laid awake at night thinking, God, it's really busy, but the cash flow's rubbish, how am I going to pay the wages, all of those. I know what that feels like. Say yes, don't say no, because if you say no, the opportunity's gone. And I always treated the failure bit as, right, what have I learned? I was straight into, right, what have I learned? Where could I improve the car? Where am I going to find that time? Here's another little trick. You're going to a meeting, you're a small businessman, get there first, be in the meeting room first, have your chair and your jacket over the back of it. They're joining your meeting. What do I need? What do I need to be really fit for the business I'm running? What does the business need to be really fit? Where are the incremental gains in the business? I've had some ill health since last July, which has had a really pretty big impact on me. I tried to still do that daily thing of getting up and going, right, it's a new day, I've got to try and improve a bit today. So I was doing, I couldn't walk, and it was pathetic. I got up, I could walk around the flat twice and I was done in, things like that. And then the next morning I got up and I did it again. And I tried not to think about anything other than today. I love my life, I love my job, and I'm happy in my skin. And I wouldn't be like this if I changed anything.
I'm on a mission to help the world to see success differently. Through sharing the stories of our guests, I hope to inspire those that listen. This is the Different Hats podcast, produced by H2 Productions. I hope you can join us on this journey. I just wanted to take a moment to talk about one of our sponsors, Nostos, an authentic experience of Greece right here in the heart of Hove. In a world brimming with dining options, finding that one place that captivates your palate and heart isn't always easy. It's about more than food. It's the stories, the ambience, the slice of another world. This is the essence of Nostos, an award-winning Greek restaurant. With traditional recipes passed down through generations, each dish promises a story and a piece of heritage. And Nostos is more than just a restaurant, it's a community contributor. Each dining experience supports initiatives close to their heart, from local charities to cultural events, enriching Brighton and Hove's social fabric. They also provide catering services, bringing Greek cuisine to your personal events. For a taste of Greece without leaving town, visit nostos-hove.co.uk. And when you do go, say Sam recommended the feta nests. Oh my God, they are amazing. Okay, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I often talk on the podcast and the other businesses that I sort of run, that I'm really fortunate I get to meet some amazing people on my journey. Certain people you immediately have a connection with. For me, just over a year ago, I sat opposite my guest over what was going to be a brief lunch. 4.5 hours later, after a wonderful conversation, we've had many, many conversations since. And I think sometimes business connections, you meet and it transcends business and becomes friendship. And that's certainly what my guest will bring today. He's someone I really class after just knowing him for just over a year. He's become a very good friend, and I'm delighted to welcome the Branch Manager of Handelsbanken, Mr. Simon Nicholson, to the podcast. How are you, sir?
I'm very good, thank you. I don't remember the lunch being 4 hours, but it was long.
It was a long lunch.
It's the longest I've ever made a salad last, I think. But it was good.
And I remember at the time sitting there and going, mate, we should get you on the podcast at some point. And then since then, every time we have a conversation, we go, could just record these conversations, couldn't we?
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, let's just get you in the studio and do it anyway. And here we are.
Yeah, good to be here.
Mate, listen, with everything, we always kick off with the people's story's got to start somewhere. So I want to know a little bit about life growing up and how that shaped who sits in front of me today.
Wow, okay. Life growing up. So my dad was an Air Force officer, so life growing up was on Air Force bases, which is quite a cool place to be a young kid, really, who's interested in aircraft. But I think it was more about, for me, the environment that my parents created. So my dad was an interesting guy. He was quite challenging. But if I sort of describe him for you, in the days of school certificate, so before O-levels and A-levels and all of that sort of stuff existed, they had school certificate. And he didn't make it to school certificate. And the reason for that is the headmistress's son was at the school, and there might have been a bit of a fight between my dad and the headmistress's son. And the headmistress told him off, and he might have punched her. And he ended up looking for a new school at the wrong time. So he didn't do school certificate. But what he did want to do was join the Air Force and fly a Spitfire. That's what he wanted to do. But he didn't know. He thought everyone in the Air Force got a Spitfire, which sounds naive, but when you're a young lad from a relatively humble family, you think things like that. So he joined the Air Force as an apprenticed radio fitter on Lancasters. And he's 16 years old, he's learning to be a radio fitter. 4 years later, he's been through Cranley Officers Training School and he's a flying officer. And that never happens, normally. Yeah. But this is the sort of guy, this sort of focus and determination. And he had that, and we grew up around that, so he huge work ethic. My mum was the same, so wherever we went, and we moved a lot because he was posted all over the place. The first thing she did was got a job. And I remember at one place where we were stationed, that she couldn't find a job, so she started a nursery school, because that's what you do, isn't it? So this was the environment, really, that I grew up in. And we went off to boarding school, which was difficult, but otherwise you're moving school every couple of years, which also is not really a good thing. So that was my formative years, really, and I grew up expecting to work hard, expecting to have to earn everything, really, and that's really how it's been.
Yeah. What was boarding school like? Did you like school?
So I loved it. My brother hated it. We were at the same schools, so different people react differently, and we're different characters, really. Yeah. So he's much more sort of emotive and sensitive, I think, than I am. So I had a whale of a time. He didn't. But I would describe it as Lord of the Flies with a little bit of supervision. So if you can imagine a boarding school with 800 boys, which is my last boarding school, mainly in reality, it's run by the school monitors with the school staff one step back. So there are things that go on. So you have to you learn to look after yourself pretty quickly, really. But the education's good. Yeah. But the social bit is interesting. And then when you leave school, of course, for me, I'd gone from boarding school, Air Force base, suddenly out in the world, and that was a bit of a big adjustment, really.
Because I guess from boarding school, Air Force, a lot of structure and discipline. Yeah. And going out into the world.
I just went mad.
Really?
Yeah, just went mad. Wasted a load of years, really.
Doing what?
Yeah.
What was your?
My parents hated motorbikes, so I bought one. I had lots of different jobs. As long as I had enough money to buy beer, I was pretty happy, really. None of the things that they expected and hoped I would do, because we had a private education, which was difficult for my parents to do, and went to very good schools. And I think I know my dad had this hope that I would go to university and do all those sort of things, but I'd really had enough by the time I did my A-levels, and I just went mad.
What was your but at school, did you have any dreams, ambitions, like that's what I want to do eventually when I get out into the wide world, that's what I want to do?
No, and I'm still not sure what I want to do when I grow up. That's kind of how I describe it. I mean, I tried all sorts of different things at school, and I always envied these. There were lots of people that I was at school with who knew exactly what they wanted to do. So they knew what A-levels they needed and what university degree they wanted and what career they were going to follow. I had absolutely no idea whatsoever. I didn't think I wanted to be in the Air Force because I'd grown up around it. I knew my dad hated the army, so I made out I wanted to join the army for a little while, and I went to army courses and all. I didn't want to join the army. I just didn't know. I had no idea. And I left school and I kind of wandered around a bit and did lots of different things and really never really knew what I wanted to do.
But you know, see, I think that for me, and I'm still similar. Like, that's why we share so much, because I'm still like that now. Still, I'll try this, I'll try that, and I think that in my head sometimes I frame that as a little bit of a superpower that you go because I think the people who are in the minority are the ones that go, that's what I want to do, and I'm going to follow that through and go and do that. And then they have a career out. Like my wife's a perfect example of it. I've known her since she was 11. She wanted to be a solicitor. She is a solicitor. She went to one of the only 2 people out of our year that went to university. She went on, but she had a focus from a young age. That's what I want to do, and she's living that. And she's got a 20-year career as a solicitor. Fantastic. But I think she's in the minority. There's so many. More so, majority will be people like me and you know, where you're at school and haven't got a clue. Like you said, I'm 45. Still really don't know what I want to do, and I'm going to keep trying things until...
So why is it a superpower?
Because I think I guess for me, life is an opportunity, and I'll keep doing these things until I find the thing or something which I feel like I'm at now, sitting here right now. Is
this it now?
This is my ikigai. The Japanese thing that a lot of people know about, but this is what lights me up. This is what fulfills me. But actually, the whole essence of the name of the brand, the different hats, the fact that I do different things gives me a variety, and variety is a spice of life, right?
Yeah.
That's potentially for me. I look at it, and I think that's how it can be reframed as a superpower, potentially. Keen to know your thoughts on that, though. What do you think about that, then?
I've never thought about it like that, to be honest. And I didn't think it was a bad thing not knowing what I wanted to do, because I just tried lots of different things. But I did envy these people who knew exactly what they wanted to do. I've always thought that must be really nice. And lots of people say to me, you've had this career in banking. It must be great to know you wanted to do that. I had absolutely no idea this is what I wanted to do. Well, but I love it, actually. But I never expected it. So it was part of my just doing different things, and it was completely left field, really.
But this is why then, again, I'll push back on that, because I think that by doing the different things that you've done, and we'll come on to obviously business and stuff like that, the different things that you've done will make you a better leader, a better banker, a better business person, because of the different experiences that you've had, no?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Definitely makes me a better banker. 100%.
Because you look at it, let's say someone has come out, has gone to university, finance, come out and gone into banking.
But you're describing the typical banker. Yeah.
Which then...
So only one side of the desk, isn't it?
Yeah. Exactly that. Well, look, you obviously mentioned your long career in banking, and people will know you as the people who know you within the community. A lot of our listeners will know Simon from Handelsbanken and within banking. But I don't know how many, because I certainly didn't know it, but about running your own company.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that. How did that come about? What happened? Talk to me about that.
So I met a girl, and she changed my life. Literally, she absolutely changed my life. So I met a girl who had a couple of kids, and they're my kids as far as I'm concerned. But we got together, and she was working for an advertising company. I was working for a transport company, and we were doing all right. It was okay, but we were never going to be able to do things like privately educate the kids if we wanted to, or anything like that. We were making a living, and we just felt that maybe we should do something different and see if we could make a success of it, and have an opportunity at least to make the money to do the things we wanted to do. Provide security for the family, educate the kids if they wanted that, those kind of things. And when I talk about it now, it sounds crazy. So, and of course, when we got together, I owned a house and she owned a house. So we did what you do. So we sold my house, because you do, don't you? And she remortgaged her house, and we started a business. And if you remember, do you remember MFI, the MFI shops? So we went to MFI, bought a couple of little desks that we squished into this tiny little spare bedroom we got, and we set a phone up, and we thought, right, well, I'd come from the transport industry, so we did some market research, which is open yellow pages. Yeah, there's lots of couriers and transport companies. That'll be good. So that was. So we started it, and we ran it for 15 years. And it was, sometimes it was good fun, sometimes it was awful. And we had a sort of vision of how we thought it should look in the future, and we got there. And we did end up creating the sort of business we wanted to, but not exactly how we thought it would go, which is interesting, because you follow opportunities, don't you? And what actually happened is, when we arrived at that point, we didn't like it.
Why?
Because it felt like you can create a bit of a monster, really. It felt like I was on hamster wheel. And I know my wife, Nicole, felt similar. And we had a guy who was interested in buying it, so it all just fitted together. In the end, it fitted together really well, and it was an easy decision. But along the way, we had difficult times. We did contracts with people that we shouldn't have done, and they went broke, owing us lots of money, and all those kind of problems that small businesses have. I've laid awake at night thinking, oh my God, we need more business, we're barely scratching by. And then I've also laid awake at night thinking, God, it's really busy, but the cash flow is rubbish, how am I going to pay the wages, all of those. I know what that feels like, and it's difficult, isn't it? And you're on your own. But I had Nicole with me, and she was just brilliant, so we just forged on and felt that we could do it. So,
how important is that, like you said, to have that partner, be a business partner and life partner, actually, but you're both in it together?
Oh, massive, absolutely massive. And she's really clever, but doesn't realise it, which is quite incredible, really. So she's really good at a lot of the things I'm rubbish at, and vice versa, really. So the business was really successful, but it just ended up not being what we wanted. And I think when we got to that point, it had done what we wanted it to do as well. So we'd reached a point where we were doing fulfillment rather than just transport. So we had a warehouse and packing stuff and sending it out, all that kind of thing. And the large companies were starting to get involved in that and making some quite big investments. So we were at a crossroads. And in business, that happens all the time, doesn't it? You come to these crossroads. And the next step would be making a bigger investment and investing in technology and things like that. And we just didn't have the appetite to do that. And we weren't enjoying the business anymore. So we got out. And we didn't have any idea what we were going to do when we did that. We just got out and sold it. So that's.
Talk during them periods. I'm keen to always when people mention about some of the difficult periods, and you're lying awake at night, which we've all been. I'm still there today. Where you're lying there, how am I going to pay that bill, or how am I going to pay them wage? What? Talk to me about your mindset around that period. What is it about you that helps you get through that? Get through those periods. What is it in your mindset that helps you get through those periods?
I think just quite resilient, to be honest. You're going to ask me about motor racing later, and that comes into this. So try and get up in the morning, and it's just another day. Make the bed. Yeah, make the bed, and get on with it. Really, and don't ring the bell. So you know what I'm talking about. So just don't give up. You just keep going. Get up every day. And actually, I have this belief that most of the time, if you talk to people, they know what to do. Whether they've got the appetite to do it is a different question, but they know what to do. So you just have to say to yourself, I need to get on and do it. And sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes it's making a decision which feels a bit rash, but you know what to do.
It's such good advice. It's hard, isn't it? Because when you're in that, sometimes it, like you said, the answers. It doesn't have to be overly complicated, does it?
No.
The answers generally, they're staring you in the face.
Yep.
It's just taking that action, and actually, a key thing. I'm keen to get your thoughts on this. I guess where actually surrounding yourself with good people. You said like you had your business partner was your life partner, so to have each other to bounce those ideas off and have that support network around you, ask for support, ask for help, is such a key thing, no?
100%. And most people want to help you as well, but you need to ask them.
Yeah.
And it's a tricky balance, isn't it? Because if they offer you advice, you feel like they're interfering. But actually, if you ask for it, they'll give it to you. But you need a great support network. Everyone does.
So it's interesting, and I was so keen to obviously tap into that about the business. Again, back to where you are now and being a banker, and that we mentioned earlier about the life skills and the knowledge that you would have gained from running your own business, that you can sit opposite someone and look at it through a completely different lens to potentially say your average banker. That's harsh maybe, but a stereotypical bank manager would do. You'd be able to look through it from a completely different lens.
Not only that, I think that the more powerful thing is you can talk to the customer in a different way. And so the moment you say to a customer, I used to run a business, so I've sat that side of the desk, everything changes. Just instantly, everything changes, because they feel that you understand them in a way the typical bank manager doesn't. So the whole journey was interesting for me, really interesting. And I'm a nosy person, and I've got a job now where I can go and see all these amazing businesses, walk in and they'll show me around and tell me all about their businesses. It's perfect for me. And the fascinating thing about that is I could show you two businesses, but outwardly they look exactly the same. They do the same thing. They maybe produce the same product, but under the skin they're completely different. And it fascinates me. So I'm quite nosy, so this is why this is the perfect job for me in so many ways.
With all the different businesses you've seen, running your own business, do you think there's certain traits that business owners have that will separate them from the successful ones and the unsuccessful ones?
Well, there are. I mean, there's everything you need to run a small business, because they all start as a small business. No one starts a PLC one day. It doesn't happen like that. They start as a bloke with a desk and a phone usually, or something like that. And you have to have this sort of dogged determination, and you just don't give up, because there are plenty of times where you probably should give up, but you don't.
Did you have that over the 15 years? Was there times when you used to sit there and go...
Yeah, there were probably times we should have stopped, but we just didn't. We just kept going. And if you read about just about any business you like, and you'll find there's a point where the liquidators were banging on the door or something like that, and they refused to quit, and then they turned a corner. It's such a common story, and that's because you need someone who is determined to do it. And then the difference, I think, that really jumps out is you have this transition between my business and the business. So for a long time, it's my business. I make all the decisions. It's mine. And if I fall under a bus tomorrow, it's in trouble. But as it grows, it becomes an entity in its own right, and then it becomes the business. And if you can't make that transition, the business doesn't grow. It stops, because you won't let go. And that's the tricky bit, and that's where you bring in people who can do the job probably better than you, because they're probably good at one bit of it, and you have to release the reins a little bit, and it becomes the business. And if you can do that, then it grows, and you hire people who are smarter than you, don't you? That's what you try and do, and that's difficult as well. Lots of people don't like doing that, but that's and the successful businesses are the ones that do that, and you see them really start to flourish. And then the guy that started it, when he's in work, he's interfering. all of a sudden. So it's quite a difficult transition, but you do see that. And you see plenty of businesses that don't get that far, and they're great businesses, and they give the owner a great lifestyle, but they've not gone that further step. So I find that really interesting. And then the other thing that they do very well, these businesses that grow, is they look over the horizon. So let's say you're turning over £1 million today. There's a few interesting barriers. If you're turning over £1 million today, the next big hurdle is actually £4 million, because at £4 million, the business has to look different. So if I said to you today, Sam, you're turning over £1 million, what does this business need to look like to do 4 million? You would be able to tell me. So the answer is, well, you need to make it look like that now. But the unpalatable part of that is, well, if I do that, we'll make less profit. Yep. But you'll be able to go to 4 million if you do that. So you have these constant times where you step back. So you get to 4 million, and the next barrier actually is about 7 million. So you're at 4 million, the business is doing great, earning lots of money. Maybe you want the Aston Martin or whatever it is, but we need to make it look like a business that can do 7 million now. So it needs more people, different infrastructure. You need to invest in it. That means you can't have that Aston Martin because we're going to spend the money making it look like that. So it's another backward step. But then the business can do 7 million. Do you see what I mean? So it's a very interesting, and the businesses that do well are prepared to do those difficult decisions, really, because at the time you're just starting to enjoy the fruits of your labour, and then you have to change it. Of course, in the end, it all catches up, and you know, there's enough money to do the things you want. But it's fascinating.
It really is, and it's hard as well, I guess, for people to, because we don't always go, like you said, when you first start that business, setting up desk in a room somewhere, you don't necessarily go, right, I'm starting this business and in 5 years' time it's going to be a £10 million business. You start it and there's them small steps, but because you put them blood, sweat and tears in, it becomes your baby. And that is, I guess, the difficult part sometimes to let go. But depending, I guess, on, I'd just, if I push back a little bit and I go, right, depending on what that individual wants, right? Yeah. Because actually, I'll give you an example. So Kevin Byrne sold Checker Trade for 90 million. He loved that business, and he sat opposite me and he spoke to me about it, and you could tell, still now, the passion he talked about that business, he loved it. Remember the day I stood up and I'm going to go national when I put that on the thing. Talked about the day he sold it, and you sort of go, like you said, you enjoy the fruits of your labour, and you feel like you've got what you set out to achieve, maybe, and actually that was an anticlimax for.
But did he get what he set out to achieve? Did he set out to build it up and sell it?
Well, no. This is the thing. He sold it because he didn't want to, and I think this is the key. Like he said, as much as that money, and it's 90 million. Yeah. As much as that money's changed his life, and
it probably depressed him, though, didn't it? Yeah.
Depressed, and you go. He even said it and said to me, he goes, "Much that money's changed my life. I wish I still had what I had."
There you go. And that's another thing that you see in businesses. The most successful businesses often have someone in there who it stops being about the money, and they're doing it because they love doing it. I mean, some of the biggest customers I deal with at the moment don't need to do another single deal, but they do them. And they don't do them for the money. They do it because they love what they're doing.
And that, for me, in life has got to be what we all want to try and obtain, right? To do something that we love doing that lights us up.
Like podcasts.
Like sitting and having a chat with me, mate. Exactly that. Exactly that. But then, what went through your head? Where was you, from a mindset point of view, at the time of selling the business? Was it a euphoric moment? Was it I'm glad I've got?
It was a moment.
Right, okay.
And we looked at it and said, because we had the business, we never quite got it to the point. If I look back on it now, I didn't realise it at the time. It never became the business. It was still our business. And knowing what I've learned since becoming a banker, I could have done that differently. But it was all consuming. So when we went on holiday with the kids, my wife used to work every morning remotely because she ran all the accounts and everything. And it gave us a nice lifestyle. It was a very nice lifestyle, but we just had enough of it. So it was a phew. And we'd accepted the fact that maybe we wouldn't live in such a big house. Maybe we'd change our lifestyle a bit, and we might bank some money, but we'd both go out and get jobs, and maybe we'd have paid holidays and things like that, and our life would be different. But we felt that's what we were looking for. And that's not exactly what happened. But it's never what you expect, is it?
So let's go on to that then. What did happen after?
What happened? Okay. So the guy we sold the business to wanted my wife Nicole to stay on and continue doing the job she was doing, which she did, and she did that I think for about 6 months. I didn't have anything to do, and he didn't want me around really. He wanted me to introduce him to a few of the customers, and then he wanted me out of the way, which is understandable. So I found myself doing things like, hanging out the washing and trying to cook a meal. I can't cook, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I needed to get a job. And what happened next was kind of quite interesting, really. So while I was doing that, occasionally I would still go and do odd jobs for the business if he needed someone. But I didn't even have a CV. So I thought, well, the first thing, we'd better get a CV done. So we've paid a CV writing company to write my CV, and I'll never forget it. I had a long interview with them over the phone, and this CV arrived and a cover letter that you could use to apply for jobs. And in the interim, most evenings when Nicole came home from work, we spent on the internet looking for jobs that I could do. We had no idea what I could do. Who wants to employ a guy who's been running his own business for 15 years? He might be a difficult employee, mightn't he? Might not like being told what to do, all that kind of thing. So anyway, this CV arrived back, and we were reading it and going, blimey, this bloke sounds good. Who the hell is he? So I thought, well, okay. We'd been looking at various websites, so I posted my CV up on Monster, and Nicole got a call from a headhunter who worked for a high street bank, wanting to know if he could have a conversation with me. So she said, well, he's in a meeting at the moment. I wasn't. I was driving a forklift truck for the day, helping unload a big Arctic, which... and I loved it. Every man should have a forklift truck, honestly. It's fantastic. So anyway, I phoned this guy back, and he was phoning from Barclays Bank, High Street Bank, and he's saying things to me like, have you thought about working in banking? And I'm sort of, is this a joke? It was just so left field for me. I've been running a small business at the end of the day, Why would a bank want to employ me? But I thought, well, if they want to have a chat to me, then I'll go and do it, Because one of the things my dad used to talk about all the time, just quickly on a tangent, he used to say yes, don't say no, because if you say no, the opportunity's gone. And if they're asking you to do something, they think you can do it. Obviously, don't be silly. If they go, we'd like you to do the 100 metres in the next Olympic Games, it's, that you're not going to do that. But within reason, if they're saying, we'd like you to do this, they think you can do it. And if you say no, that opportunity has gone. And this is what he used to say all the time. So I thought, well, I'll say yes. So I said yes, and I had this whole series, I think about 8 different interviews at the bank. I found it really quite intimidating. These people were clever, I thought. These people are clever, big swanky offices. Why are they talking to me? And it went on and on and on. And then we'd kind of come to the conclusion that wasn't going to happen. And then out of the blue, they said, we'd like you to have a proper formal interview. And what they were looking for, it was quite interesting. So in the sort of corporate side of Barclays Bank, they have industry-focused teams. And the idea behind that is the bank managers in those teams know about the industry they're looking after. So one of them was, for example, the retail and wholesale division. So they looked after large retailers and wholesalers, sort of retail supply chain really, which was sort of what we'd ended up doing in our business, because we'd been delivering into Tesco's and people like that. So I'm sitting there going, I don't know why you want to be talking to me because I've never worked in a bank. And they said, no, that's why we want to talk to you. You've been in the industry. We've got bankers here, but we haven't got people who really understand the industry. So I go up for this interview, and they play silly games with you in the interview, right? So the brief is, come up, we'd like you to give a presentation on a challenge you had in your business. Fair enough. And we'll also do an interview, and in between it we'll have a little break. So we'll start with coffee and just get to know each other. Then we'll do the interview. Then we'll have a coffee break. Then we'll do the presentation. So I report to reception in Barclays head office a bit early. Yeah. And I'm due there at midday, and I sit down about 10 to 12 or something like that. And midday comes and goes, and I'm still sitting there. And then eventually this girl arrives looking slightly flustered and said, "Are you Mr. Nicholson?" I said, "Yes." "What are you doing here? You're meant to be at the other reception round the corner. You better hurry up because they've been waiting for you and it's nearly 12:15. So that's not a great start to an interview. So I go round very flustered and I go into the interview and they go, "Well, you're late, so we'll have to skip all the coffee bit and we'll have to change things around to make sure we get what we need out of the interview. So let's go straight with your presentation, please." Wow. And I'm standing in front of the two area directors of manufacturing and retail and wholesale. So I am super intimidated at this point. And they're expecting a PowerPoint presentation, and I've never used PowerPoint, so I start using a flip chart and a marker pen. And that's how I do my presentation. And then we go straight into the interview, and they offer me a job. Well, it doesn't quite work like that. After the interview, I think it's gone badly because I was late and all this sort of stuff. And I was nervous, I was very nervous. So I came out of the interview and I phoned Nicole and I said, "I think I've screwed it up. I'm really sorry." And she said, "Well, don't worry about it. Come home. I'm sure we'll find something else for you to do." About an hour later, I'm on the train and this lady who was the head of retail and wholesale phoned me and said, "I just wanted to let you know you've benchmarked for the role. Doesn't mean we're going to offer you the job, but we're going to have a little chat, but you benchmark, you're capable of doing the job." Anyway, about 2 days later, they offered me the job. And I walked in, and just think about this for a minute, I walked into Barclays head office to take over a team of relationship directors. Now, in Barclays corporate, if you're the best of the best account managers, you move into the industry-focused teams. So they're all degree educated. They've all had 20 plus years in the bank and they're viewed as the best. And I walk in and I've got 12 of them reporting into me and I've never worked in a bank. And that's how it started, day one. So it was interesting. And they weren't pleased to see me, let's say. They were not pleased to see me.
How do you, there's so much to come out of, but firstly, how do you overcome that? Because you walk in that day one.
Well,
imposter syndrome.
Terrible imposter syndrome. Absolutely terrible. I was bricking it on the train up there. It was awful. And I had a little bit of an induction and training it lasted a morning. So what happened was I sat down with the girl who was Jane, who was going to be my boss, who was the head of retail and wholesale. And she just ran me through the characters in my team. The whole team was a lot bigger, but she had one half, I had the other half. Yeah. And she walked them through, and I'm making these notes like that. And then at the end of it, she said, "So that's it, you're on your own, sink or swim." And got up and walked out. And I'm sitting in the cafe in the middle of Barclays corporate thinking, what the hell am I doing here? So I thought, well, I better go and get these guys together and have a chat to them. And I got them in a meeting room. You could have heard a pin drop. They weren't pleased to see me. So I said, what we'll do is we'll arrange for one-to-one so we can get to know each other. At this point, I didn't have a laptop or anything. I was waiting for my kit. I didn't have a business card. I had my own mobile phone. And I was completely super imposter syndrome, really. And then the other thing I learned very quickly was Barclays head office. Right? I had my own parking space under Barclays head office. If I chose to drive my car in, they cleaned it for me while it was parked there. I had a PA. We had dry cleaning facilities, everything. The PA would do anything like that for me. Get my shoes repaired, what do you need, and it all felt a bit weird to me. They just treated you fabulously, really.
You go from running your own business where you're the marketeer, you're doing everything, you're everything to everybody, to then going in and...
Yeah, and I will never forget the very first one-to-one I had. This guy came, and we've got a little room a bit like this with glass wall, little meeting room. So I've got coffee and biscuits, and I thought, I need to make a good impression here. Although I'm a bit kind of scared of these clever bankers. Anyway, he didn't even knock on the door. He walked in, sat down, and he just sat opposite me, arms folded like that. And I said, so I thought it'd be good for us to get to know each other. And he just went, what gives you the right to lead me?
This is the first person.
This is the first person. And I'm thinking, oh, God, Jesus, this is going to be difficult, So that was how it started, and that was pretty hard.
What's your response to that?
Oh, well, I asked him to leave the room. So I said, look, I understand. I had to come back with something, didn't I? So I understand how you're feeling, but the reality is my business card says corporate director and yours doesn't, and I am going to be your boss, whether we like it or not. So why don't you go out of the room and start again by knocking on the door, and let's see if we can, start the meeting a bit better. And he did. He went out the door. I'll tell you something else about him. He knocked on the door, came in, and he said, and he stuck his hand out, introduced himself, and said, "I'm pleased to meet you." And we started again. And I know him well. He now works in this bank I'm in now, and we're quite good friends. But it wasn't like that in the beginning. But what I did was I said to them fairly quickly that they hadn't had a team leader who had enough time to go out with them, and bank managers love their boss to go with them to the meetings. And the reason for that is if there's any flack, the boss gets it. So, and they hadn't had that for quite a while. And Jane, who was going to be my boss, had tipped me off to that. So I just sat them down. I did the one-to-ones, got to know them a bit. And most of them they weren't all challenging. Most of them were on that a little bit. Who are you? Why are you here? And then we sat down in a meeting, and I said, look, guys, I haven't got a laptop or anything, so I can't do any actual real work here. So just take me out. I'll come out with you. And then the games started. So I would get, can you come out on this meeting? He's an art dealer. It's just an annual review. Great customer, loves us. And I'd roll up and find that was bullshit. And he was a very unhappy customer and hated us because we'd pulled his overdraft or something. Yeah. Not only that, he'd been told the corporate director was coming. So he was looking forward to seeing me, So we had all of that shenanigans. So I had to sit them down again. I said, look, don't do that. If it's awful, tell me. I don't mind. Take me to the awful meetings. Are these the bits you hate the most? And they said, yeah, they're awful. Because that was at a time, this is 2008.
Okay, yeah.
And we're pulling, banks are pulling overdrafts. It was a very, very difficult time to be a banker. So I said, look, the reality is my business card says I'm the corporate director. So they can shout at me if you like. I don't mind. And you guys can do the bit that you do. And actually, that's when it all started changing a little bit. Because I said, I don't mind, I'll take the heat, I don't mind. You can do your job much better than me. I've never worked in a bank, but I can take the heat. I know how to do that. Because as a small business, you learn that really quickly, don't you? Yeah. So that's what we did. And that's when things started to change a little bit. And then the next thing I discovered was that small business people underestimate how good they are, in my view. Because what I realised, I'm sitting in Barclays Bank, right, this amazing bank, and they've got much better now, but the business plan wasn't what I would have called a business plan. It was all about numbers, but not what we're going to do, why we're doing it. It didn't feel like the guys knew why they were getting out of bed in the morning. All the simple things that you would cover off as a small business wasn't there. So we started to talk about things like that, and we started, having our own mission statement and why are we doing these things, and we had much more frequent touch points with each other rather than they just had a monthly team meeting and the rest of the time they were on their own. So we stopped doing that. We had a weekly call on a Monday morning and we set the week up and we did a few fun things and it was just brilliant fun, honestly. And the guys enjoyed it, and I stopped being this strange outsider and I became part of the team. but they still, you know, way better bankers than me. I mean, I'd only been there 5 minutes. But that's what the bank was looking for, wasn't it? Something different.
But there's so much there about that so many listeners can take away around great leadership, right? And actually just being a good people person. Above all things, degrees, everything else that we can get, and certificates and letters after our names and all them things, ultimately, if you can sit opposite a person and have a conversation and build a relationship, that's one of the most valuable skill sets as a leader, right?
I think there's some things that we still talk about now. So the key thing is lead people, manage processes. Don't manage people. Lead people. Let them make their own decisions. Let them make their own mistakes. And my dad used to try and explain it to me. He used to say, leadership, the clue's in the title. And if you think about leadership, if you think of it, everything with him was military, but I always have it in my head. A great leader is not the colonel who's 5 miles behind the lines chomping on a big fat cigar. I mean, it's not like that now, of course, but that's the view you have in your head. A great leader is the young sub-lieutenant in the trench. Now think about this for a minute. He hasn't got a tin hat on, he's got a cloth hat on. And he hasn't got a rifle, he's got a pistol. But who goes over the top first? He does. And once he's done it, those guys will follow him anywhere. So you've got to try and think about that, and how do you bring that into your business? And the answer is, you find the crappiest part of the job and go and do it. That's what you do.
That's what obviously, like you said, you identified that from an early stage, which they didn't want the part of the job that they didn't want.
What do you hate the most?
And I'm going to take that on.
I'll take that on. And then everything changes.
The dynamic between...
Completely. And I'm a big fan of things like Tuckman. I don't know if you know about the Tuckman model from the early 60s. So this is the team formation model. When you put a new team together, or you change a team by adding people to it, which happens all the time in business, doesn't it? Teams go through various stages. It's called forming, storming, norming, performing. If you look it up, it's really interesting. And there's different leadership styles that you need to use for different stages of it. So the forming bit is where everyone's overly polite to each other. Nobody quite knows who fits where, so you're all very polite to each other. Yep. Once you settle in, then you're jockeying for position, and that's storming. A few arguments start, they tests of authority, see how far you can push your boss, that kind of thing. And that's because people want to know where they fit and they're trying to work it out. And then when they know, you move into norming, and then performing is where things just happen. So at some stages you need to tell people what to do, but it's very brief. You much more quickly move into the facilitation area where you give people permission to do things and encourage them. And normally you can spot that because you're sitting at your desk and every 2 minutes someone's at your desk going, can I just run this past you? So what you must say to them is, well, what do you want to do? Don't make the decision. What do you want to do? Right, go and do it. Well, what if it goes wrong? Well, it's fine. If it goes wrong, we'll learn from it. But don't worry about it. You're allowed to make that decision, and you encourage them to do that. And it's really, really important, because if you do that, then they just start doing it. If you fall into the temptation of telling them what to do, which is, we all want to do that, because we think we know the answer, don't we? So, but if you tell them what to do, they will only do it as long as you tell them to. And the day you stop telling them, they stop doing it. So you have to move into this facilitation where, well, they have to be prepared to follow you first, of course. But if you can move into that, they love it because the job is more satisfying.
Because you've empowered them.
You've empowered them to make decisions. And when it goes wrong, they can't be in trouble. They cannot be in trouble. You've got to have their back and use it as a learning experience. And it takes a lot of self-control because you really want to get in there and tell them what to do, because you might even know they're not making quite the right decision, but it's very, very important that you don't do that. And then you end up walking into a team and all the things you wanted to happen are just starting to happen. It's fascinating.
They really are.
Fascinating.
Touching on that point then, I want to, with the empowering people, allowing them to make mistakes. What's your relationship like with failure? How would you describe your relationship with failure?
I've had quite a bit of it. I'd say quite a good relationship with it. I know it well.
I might top trump you on that one, but we're going.
You might, yeah. I don't know, actually. Yeah, I mean, you've got to have a go, haven't you? And sometimes it doesn't work. I had a fair bit of that. So when I made this jump into banking, there's lots of skills you need which I didn't have. So as a person running a small fulfillment business, I never made presentations and things like that, and I was expected at the level I was in the bank to be able to do that. And I found myself in a room full of leaders, and it was pointed out to me very early on that I was the only one in the room without a degree.
How did that make you feel?
Well, a bit shit, really, to be honest. So I decided I would do something about that, so I did a degree. I thought, well, I'm on the train 2 hours each way. I'll do my banking degree, which I did. So they couldn't say that anymore. And they had things like, they were really great presenters because they had years in the bank and loads of different training. I'd had none. I'd never done anything. And suddenly I'm standing up in rooms full of people trying to navigate my way through PowerPoint. And I failed all over the place, literally all over the place. But you've got to get up there and try and do it. But each time you do it, you learn something, don't you? And I know motor racing's coming later, but here's a motor racing thing for you. If you're Lewis Hamilton, right, I want you to imagine this is your job, right? You're Lewis Hamilton, probably the most successful driver of all time, probably. Every time you get in the car, 85% of the time you're going to fail. And that's him. The rest of us, mere mortals who choose to do that, is probably 95% of the time we're going to fail. Now imagine you had a job where it was like that. Every day you come in, 95 out of 100 days you're going to fail. How do you keep going? How do you do that?
Okay, I'm just going to say something about one of our sponsors, Riverval. The world of cars, vans and minibuses is often a pain point for many of us. The hassle of finding the right vehicle, let alone looking after it, are all more things to add to our lists as busy people. Riverval's mission is to make motoring manageable, and that's why they provide leasing, purchasing, servicing and vehicle management. So whether you have one family car or a fleet of vans for your business, Riverval are your trusted vehicle supplier. Visit www.riverval.co.uk. Okay, let's jump back to the podcast.
And what is the answer to that? How do you?
Well, you have to compartmentalise it, don't you? So you have to go, that was yesterday, this is today. And take the lessons from yesterday and go, okay, well, maybe today it's going to be a 5% day. And it always has to be like that. Always, every single time. And motorsport teaches you this because that's the reality, is most of the time when you go and race, you're going to lose. Most of the time. And if you're in a race, nobody gets every single corner right every single lap. You're going to mess up one of the corners, more than one probably, and you can't worry about it. It can't follow you around the track, which is your natural human nature. You're angry with yourself. You have to learn. If you do that, you're going to mess the next corner up as well. So you learn to drop it immediately and move on. And it's a huge skill that transfers into business. And if you ever watch a racing driver being interviewed after a bad race, they've already forgotten it, and they're talking about the next race. And that's how they do it. They just put it behind them. They can't do anything about it. It's done, and they move on. And it takes a while to learn that. And it's very transferable. Very, very transferable. So I've tried to use that as much as I can.
Let's jump in there then. Let's jump into the motor sport. Like, we couldn't obviously have this conversation without talking about motorsport and your love for it and go-karting. Talk to us a little bit. When did that passion first arise? And you've just alluded to there, no, how many transferable skills can come from that you've taken into the business world. Talk to me a little bit about it.
So motor racing started, I'm not 100% sure on the year, it was either 1970 or 1972. I was either 8 or 10 years old, something like that. And the place is Jesolo in Italy. And I'm on holiday with my parents, and in Jesolo there's a very famous kart track, and they had little karts for children to drive, and I got to drive one of these karts, and that was it for me. And the following day we sat and watched the karting world championship at that track, and I was hooked. That was just it. I was hooked, and it became my religion basically. And even as a little kid, we were watching Formula One. We lived in Germany then. We found another kart track near where we lived, and we used to go and pay and drive the karts there. Sometimes I couldn't reach the pedals because I was only little, and I remained very little. I think when I was 16, I was still only about 5 foot tall. So sometimes I couldn't go in them because they were too big for me and things like that. But it just became this passion, absolute, complete passion that's never left. It's never left me.
But when I said to you about being back at school and your passions or was being a Formula One racing driver, not something at school, like obviously, because that you can tell we spoke many times about it. You can tell now, you sit opposite me now, he lights up, and you can tell.
Yeah.
Was that not something?
Yeah, I guess so, but it probably felt. I don't know if it felt unattainable, whether I was just too confused at the time about what I should be doing with myself.
Yeah.
So, and I think I didn't have the discipline. I was probably rebelling by the time I left school, because I went to a prep school at the age of just before my 8th birthday. I went to boarding school. My parents were in Germany, I was in England, and I left 11 years later, and I'd had enough of it. So I think I was kicking back for quite a few years. I think I was kicking back. So I didn't have the clarity of thought, and I definitely didn't have the discipline that is required.
And it's also, there's something in this for me that people go, find your passion and what really lights you up, what you're doing, and you go and make a career out of that. But actually, the caveat to that sometimes is you try and make a career out of it, and then do you stop loving it? Does it stop becoming your passion?
Becomes a job.
Because it becomes a job, yeah, exactly. So, because you've had quite a long karting career, could we say?
So there's a nice little tail end to it. I've been invited back to Jesolo a few times. Every year there's a big meeting called the Italians do it so much better, don't they? Up here we call it historic kart meeting, right? And they get all the historic karts out. You do exhibition laps. Well, they call them exhibition laps. We rag them, and all the karts are on display, and a few famous drivers come in. It's called historic kart meeting. In Italy, it's called Coppa di Campioni. Sounds so much better, doesn't it? And it's held at Jesolo. And they'd invited me a couple of times, and I hadn't gone. And then I said to Nicole recently, I better go before I'm too old, and I'll never do it then. So, and then one of the guys said, we'll ship the cart over for you, or you just pay the cost of it. It was about 300 quid or something. So they shipped the cart over to Italy for me, and I flew over. And it was just this most amazing experience, because the first thing that happened is I'm strolling in, and one of my old karts is on display, and it's a bit weird. It's imposter syndrome all over again. Anyway, I drove a few demonstration laps around here, and it was 50 years almost to the day from when I'd first driven a kart there, and I haven't driven it since.
Wow.
That was it.
Wow.
So, and I've stopped. That was so I started and finished in Jesolo, and we've got pictures of, my mum somewhere has got a picture of me in this little cart there. And they took me to the track where the picture was taken and sat me in my historic car and took a picture of me 50 years later. So, which is quite nice, sort of, but I've had to park all of that now because my body's not really strong enough to do it anymore. But I've loved every second of it, honestly. Absolutely loved it.
And talk to me a bit more then about the lessons that you can take from that. Like you said, you've alluded to a couple already. About that failure point, I find that fascinating. That point, especially in motorsport, and you've got to have, I guess, no fear. I guess sitting in a car or motor racing, but whatever it is, and you're riding at that speed, you've got to look at things differently, right? You've got to look ahead and look at things slightly differently, with no fear to that. Would I be right in assuming?
Yeah, well, kind of. My dad used to say he thinks that racing drivers have a bit of their brain missing, or a bit of it's just never grown up. Is another way of looking at it, and that is when you're a teenager, you have this part of your brain that assesses risk is very small and it's still developing, which is why teenagers do crazy things. And as you become an adult, you're more aware of risk, aren't you?
Yeah, sure.
Particularly as you've learned, that if you run up the stairs, you might trip and fall over.
Yeah.
So you probably don't do it again and things like that. And I don't think that part of my brain, it never grew up. So, and that's typical, I think, of most racing drivers. So you get in the car and you never think it's going to happen to you. So you just don't think about it. You do not think about the risk. Afterwards, when you get out of the car, you suddenly go, oh, that was a bit close, Oh, if I'd had a puncture there. But you don't think about it when you're in the car or the cart until one day you do. And that's the day you need to stop, because you're no longer racing. And I got to that point. There were various tracks where I knew, for example, the first corner was in theory flat out, and I used to do it flat out, I can't do that anymore because my foot just lifts off the gas. So it's time to stop. But the psychology of it is fascinating.
Because what really fascinates me about it is that what do you take from that view of risk that you then take into the business world, life in general?
Well, for me, it's the two things are kind of separate. So if you think about it, I've had quite a long banking career now, and most of my time in banking is about minimising risk for people. And then my hobby is about taking risks. It's like a balance, isn't it? And the two things are quite different. And it's fascinating, and I guess maybe I needed that outlet. I don't know, and I never thought it would happen to me, but sometimes it has happened to me, And I always treated the failure bit as, right, what have I learned? I was straight into, right, what have I learned? Where could I improve the cart? Where am I going to find that time? It was never, I failed, oh no, and beat myself up. It was always, right, what do I need to do better if I'm going to improve? And actually the interesting thing for me was it wasn't about being a faster driver. Invariably, it wasn't about that. It was about all the other things that go with it. And I'll give you a really fascinating insight into the psychology, and I think you can use this in business. I honestly think you can use this in business. I ended up driving, and this is nuts, again, this is a stupid thing that should never happen, but I said yes, okay? So we were on holiday in, I forget where we were now. I think we were in the States or somewhere like that. And I was sitting by the pool, and I hadn't done any karting for a few years, and I said to Nicole, do you know what? I think I fancy going back karting again. Maybe I should buy a car. And she said, well, before you do that, why don't you phone your pal who runs the British Championship and just, see if anyone wants to drive it. And I was like, I'm 45. No one's going to want a 45-year-old driver. That's ridiculous. But I'll do it anyway. So I did. So I sent this guy called Rene an email, and I said, look, I'm thinking of doing it again. Do you know anyone what do you think? Anyway, I get an email back going, yeah, why don't you ring Dave? Here's Dave's mobile number. When you get back to the UK, give him a call. So I ring Dave, who I've got no idea who Dave is. I ring Dave. Dave goes, yeah. Why don't you come to Wilton Mill? We're doing a test day. Come and have a go. So I roll up and I find that Dave owns GMS. GMS is a cart manufacturer. which is not what I was expecting. And they've got a big test day at Wilton Mill. It becomes clear really quickly that he's having a look at me. And I'm thinking, so imposter syndrome jumps in again, you know. There's all these young lads, super quick, skinny guys, all that sort of stuff. But it turns out that Dave was looking for someone to drive for the factory in his endurance racing team, different skill set. And he really liked what I did that day, much to my surprise. And I find myself driving for his team in the British Championship at 45 years old. And this is where I learnt so much from him. So I said, why do you want me? I'm never going to be the quickest, and I never have been, actually. He said, no, I know. He said, but you're not far off the quick guys. He said, but the difference between you and the quick guys is you just don't make any mistakes. You never put a tyre off. You're not going to crash. And you deliver the lap times the same, lap after lap after lap, the same. And that's what we want in endurance racing. I don't need someone quick who's going to make a mistake. I need someone who can just deliver the lap time. He said, and the rest of it I'll work with you on. And this is how he did it, and this is what really fascinated me. The way the day started is you're checked and weighed, and and the carts are all scrutineered, and then you all go to driver's briefing, which we used to call the bollocking before you've done anything wrong, which is kind of how it was. This is what's going to happen if you do wrong, we'll black flag you, all that kind of stuff. And everyone's standing there casually dressed, because we haven't got dressed for racing yet. And the moment driver's briefing, which is held next to the pit lane, the moment driver's briefing is over and you come out of the building, the track is open for practice. But nobody's out, because you've got to go back, get changed into your race suit, bring the carts up, get them started, and off you go. So Dave said to me, I want you to go to driver's briefing in full race kit with your helmet and gloves in your hand. And I said, why do I want to do that? He said, you'll be the only one in the room that looks like a racing driver. And they're all going to look at you in your lovely, nice, clean race suit and go, God, he looks the business. And they'll think of you. In their mind, they're just going to lodge this thought that you look like a proper racing driver. So we did that. And he said, and when you walk out of driver's briefing, I'll have your cart sitting there ready for you, running. And I want you to get in it and go straight out on the track. So I was like, okay, but why are we doing that, Dave? He said, because by the time they bring their carts up and get them out, you'll be going round fast, because you'll be 10 laps in. And the rule is, when you come out onto track in a cold cart, if anyone's coming round on hot laps, you have to get out their way. So he said, they're all going to have to get out of your way. That will be the first thing that happens to them when they come on track, is they've got to get out of your way. He said, and when you're going slowly coming out of the pits and someone comes back at race pace, they look really fast. Even if they're not, they look really fast. So he said, by 5 minutes into practice, they've already thought you look like a racing driver, and they've had to let you past, and they think you look quick. Now, we both know I'm not the quickest, but you look it. He said, and I promise you that will pay dividends. And then he said, the next thing we will do is the setup on your cart. We've concentrated on race setup, so you're not going to qualify that well. But the cart will be easy to drive and will race well. Everyone else tries to put a qualifying setup on. So normally that means the cart's horrible to drive, but it's fast, but pretty awful to race with. So we didn't worry about that, and I would normally qualify 6th, 7th, maybe 8th, something like that. And he said, what will happen now? He said, on the first lap, when you put your nose of your car inside them, they'll get out the way because they think you're quick. And that's what will happen. And all we practiced during the practice, because we knew the car was set up, all we practiced was the first 2 laps of the race. So I would go out, do a formation lap, which is what you do, and then do 2 flying laps and come in. So I knew exactly what the cart felt like on the first 2 laps. And that's what we concentrated on. And then it's really interesting psychology, isn't it? And then what happened on the race, lining up for the race, they put all the carts on the grid, a bit like you see in a Formula One race. And the drivers are out of the car, and then they call you up, and you all go and sit in the car. And he said, don't come when they call you. He said, come when I wave to you. And I said, well, what's that about? He said, you just come and when I wave to you, I want you to walk up the middle of the grid and get into your car. He said, because then they'll have to wait for you. And that's another little psychological thing. So it all builds together that they think you're a proper racing driver, you're clearly quick, they've already got out of the way with you once, and you're some sort of important person because everyone had to wait for you before the race started. And then he said, I want you to then use what you learned in the testing session in the first 2 laps. I want you to go fully aggressive and overtake everyone that you can, and you know what your kart feels like. And on the first couple of laps, everyone's very tentative. I wasn't. And they got out of the way. And the idea was to try and get me in the first 4 or 5, and then we did lifting and coasting, because the other thing that we'd realised is everyone goes, the first stint I did was an hour long, 1 hour in a cart, hard work. Right? So we trained for it. I was fit enough that I could do an hour with no sweat at all. So we would lift and coast, because we realised if we lifted and coasted, we could do an hour and 10 minutes. So I would try and get in the top 5 and just follow them. I didn't want to overtake them. I just followed them. So you just kind of step it down a little bit. You lift off a little bit earlier. You just follow them. Sit in their draft, and it saves a surprising amount of fuel. And then the moment they start pitting, Dave used to wave a flag to me, and I had 10 minutes then on low fuel, and I used to go for it. Now, they were sitting stationary in the pits while we were out on track with 10 minutes fuel left. And invariably, then when I pitted and handed over to the second driver, we were in the lead. And I wasn't the fastest driver. And it's all in the psychology. It's absolutely fascinating. And I think if you're a small business, you can use all of that. If you roll up an event and you look the business, people form an opinion about you, don't they? And you just think about how you can use all of those things. If you're going to a meeting, here's another little trick. You're going to a meeting, you're a small businessman, get there first, be in the meeting room first, have your chair and your jacket over the back of it. They're joining your meeting, not the other way around. There's all these little tricks that you can use. And that's the equivalent to Dave, going, you come on the grid when we're ready and make everyone else wait. All those kind of things. Completely transferable, fascinating psychology. So I won lots of races without being the quickest. But they thought I was. It's amazing, isn't it?
It's so much. It's mind-blowing. There's so much to take from it. But and even like you said, those consistency, marginal gains. All of those little things that you can go, back to the 1% rule, that
1%,
type of thing.
yeah.
Just little incremental things that you can change in your day-to-day life, business, whatever that is, to just get you that little bit.
And to do all of the things I've just described, it was hard for me at 45, and it got harder as I got older, because the level of fitness to drive a 2-stroke race cart for an hour, it's kind of hard to get there. But we worked at that, and I was fit enough that I would get out at the end of it, and I was fine. And they noticed, other drivers notice, and they're like, blimey, he's not even worn out. He's and it's kind of what Schumacher did in Formula One. If you ever watch Formula One, he got up on he looked fresh as a daisy. The others looked destroyed, and this is this psychological edge, and you can do it in business. You make sure you're fit enough. Work on it. Watch your diet. Make sure you're fit. Get some exercise, whatever it might be. And for me, that was hard, So we used to live in Worthing, and I commuted into Hove and Brighton, and I used to cycle, and it made me get on the bike on a cold, rainy day, because I needed that fitness. I wanted that fitness, and I wanted to. And a lot of races came back to us just because we had a better level of fitness than everybody else. And we had 4 drivers in my team, all the same, all fit, all using the same kind of psychology, and we worked hard at it. And we won races that we shouldn't have won. And it was great fun. I did it for 2 years, and then I thought, I have to stop, because it was getting too hard. And then I went historic karting. So, but all of that is transferable. You have to sort of go, what do I need? What do I need to be really fit for the business I'm running? What does the business need to be really fit? Where are the incremental gains in the business? And it's often little things. One of the things that always interests me, see a business start up, and they grow really quickly, don't they? and then they stop. Why do they stop? The reason they stop is they've probably stopped doing the things they did when they first started. They stop marketing at the same level. They stop doing mail shots or whatever it might be, and the growth slows down. So why have they stopped doing that?
This is Geo. Geo runs a scarf company. Geo doesn't see the need for telecoms. Everybody uses mobiles now. But can a mobile really be a business phone? Geo is having coffee with a client, Gabby. Well, actually, Geo prefers acacia leaf tea. But what happens when someone calls? It could be a big new deal. Surely it would be rude to take the call? But many people hate leaving messages. They may just call a competitor instead. What can Geo do? The answer is simple. Turn the mobile into a business phone. With the Go-Giraffe app, Geo can quickly transfer the call. Or, before the meeting, Geo can simply use the app to divert calls. No more missed calls, lost deals, or unhappy customers. Turn your mobile into a business phone today. Go-Giraffe.
You're right.
You
It's
settle,
complacency,
don't you? You settle.
Yeah.
I know, and it's not even. I don't think it's even a conscious thing. And you get busy. There's stuff to do, so it kind of,
But for me, one of the biggest things out of everything you've just said there is paying attention to the very small details.
Oh yeah. And we tested everything. So like that finding we could squeeze 1 hour, 10 minutes out, we found by trying it. We tried it on a test day, and we were doing things like changing the tyre pressures by 1 psi and things like that, just trying to find that little. And the rationale we had is, if we can, I'll tell you about the engines in a minute, and it's nuts the level we went to. If we can get the best possible engine, that might be worth a tenth or two. If we can get the tyre pressures just right, that might be a tenth or two. And if we can make sure the driver is really fit and on his best game, that might be a tenth or two. And you add those incremental things up, you find half a second. And it's not all in the driver, you see, it's all everywhere else. And the way that they did it was just unbelievable. So the first time, it really surprised me, the first time I come into the pits in my cart, and they're immediately taking the temperature in 3 different places on all the tyres. And they don't look at the pressure gauge, they look at the temperature of the tyre. And what they did was they take the temperature on the 2 outside edges and the middle of each individual tyre, and they note it down. They're looking for the temperatures to all be the same. So if the middle one's higher than the outside one, the pressure's too high on that tyre. So they just knock it down half a psi or something. And they're just nibbling away at it till they've got all the tyres at the right temperature. And the moment they got there, they said, right, park the cart, get out, let it cool down, take the tyre pressure. That's the cold tyre pressure that is going to work. And that's the sort of level of detail they went into. It's just extraordinary. And what they did with the engines is we had 2, just for my cart that I was driving, 1 cart. The engines cost about £3,000 each. They bought 10 engines, ran them all in, and then stripped them. And then you have a fiche for the engine of what everything should measure, and they measured all the parts against the fiche and selected all the parts that were closest to the regulated fiche. And if you build the engine from that, because you're not allowed to modify them, that will be the best and quickest engine. So they built that, then they built a second best, and those were our 2 engines, and they sold the rest. So the whole exercise of that cost them, but we had 2 fantastic engines. Just again, that little tenth there, tenth on the tyre pressures, made sure we were fit, made sure we were hydrated. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating.
Like you said.
But I couldn't keep it up at 45 years old. I just couldn't keep, it's just too hard.
It's like you said, for me, there's so much in all of that. And I've heard, I can't remember who the guy was, but the cycling coach who done a very similar thing with the
marginal gains.
Marginal gains. And when you listen to these conversations and the amount that people can take, just as a small business owner, if they listen to just this little section of the podcast, but take away their...
What are the marginal gains in your business?
clips.
What I mean, yours, for
Yeah.
example. What are the marginal gains in your business? What are they?
For me, it's so much. I find this is why I find this so fascinating, because the podcast itself is so much like I play around with everything from the title to the thumbnail that I'm going to use to the wording on that thumbnail to see what, and then you try and test something that goes, actually, why has that title got 5,000 views as opposed to that one? Well, I think that's a really great clip. Actually, was that the greatest clip? Could I use that to entice people with more? And it's the attention to. I love this so much because I'll get to have these conversations. I'll go away. One of my favourite parts is going away, listening back to it, and going, what part can I take out of this conversation? I think there's going to be quite a few in this one now. I'm not going to lie, but what part can I take out where you go, actually, that bit is going to grab people's attention, and that bit, because there's so much gold in there, those little gold nuggets that you're listening to. So but there's so much to it that I go, right, all of those little minor details is going to enhance that episode that little bit more.
Yeah, I think that's great. And if people can start thinking about their business in terms of marginal gains, because most businesses are going quite well. If you're a small business and you've survived for it, I mean, some of them are amazing and incredibly resilient people. If you can get them to start thinking about their business, what are the marginal gains, and they can start thinking about that, it's a hugely cumulative effect. What was it we said this morning? If you improve by 1% a month, in 3 years' time, you're a different person. You can imagine that in your business. I mean, it's just phenomenal.
It really is.
So, yeah, it's fascinating.
Look, I want to, throughout everyone's journey, I always want to highlight or talk about some of the struggles and challenges that you face and how we sort of overcome them. We've delved into a bit about mindset around failure and stuff like that, but pick any point of your journey, whether it be running a business, within banking, motor racing, whatever that be. Talk to me about a challenge you've faced and how you overcome that, what you learn from that.
A challenge I faced that I overcame and what I learned from it. Yeah, there's been a few, probably, I would say. I'm going through one at the moment, actually, as you know. So I've had some ill health since last July, which has had a really pretty big impact on me. And it's been quite difficult, and it's been difficult in the sense that I didn't have a clear recovery roadmap, and I didn't know if I was going to recover, and if I did, what was it going to be like? And that becomes very difficult. So I tried to still do that daily thing of getting up and going, right, it's a new day, I've got to try and improve a bit today. So I was doing I couldn't walk. So the first physio session that I went to, Nicole wheeled me around there in a wheelchair. So it becomes small goals. So I was determined to walk to the physio, and it's behind our building. It's not very far, but I couldn't do it. And I think we did 2 physio sessions like that, and by the third one, I was on a pair of crutches walking slowly. So it becomes these little goals that hopefully will take you in the right direction. So I concentrated on that. I concentrated on, when I got given my physio exercises, I did them every day. Because the physio said to me that if you do them every day, most people don't. I thought, right, well, I will. And she said, and every hour you need to get up and move. So I got this little thing that goes off every hour, and I get up. I wasn't going to work. I couldn't work. So every hour it went off, and I got up and did something. I had to walk around the flat. And it was pathetic. I got up. I could walk around the flat twice, and I was done in. Things like that. But I did it every day, every single day. And then the next morning I got up and I did it again. And I tried not to think about anything other than today. I've just got to do it today. You know what I was like then, you saw me. And gradually, it's been improving. And I just kept going. And I think that's this resilience piece that I honestly think everyone can do that. Everyone. I really believe that they can. And Nicole was amazing. And she did exactly the same thing. It was hard for her, but every day we just went, right, here we go again. And we often say that to each other now. Right, here we go again. And we just go for today. And it's been hard, but I am walking again now, and I'm back at work, which is good.
Well, that's great to hear. And like you said, I think you underestimate how inspiring, even at that point of us catching up.
When I hobbled into the cafe with my sticks.
That's what I mean. I can still remember, because I remember speaking to Rachel, and she said that you, and I hadn't seen you for a little bit, and then she mentioned that you hadn't been well or not. So I reached out, and you told me what had happened, and I remember saying, "Oh, well, look, let's meet up. I'd love to have a coffee." And I remember you coming. No, I'll come to you. I'll come to. I need to get out and do that. And you come down on. I remember on your crutches. You come and sat with me and talked and told me what had been going on, and just so inspiring. Like you said, I think for me, what I take out of that and a lot of the conversation is that we do all have a choice, and it's how when we get up every day, what choice can we make that is just that day? What can we do today that can make me get a bit better, whether it be health, whether it be your business, whatever it is there something in our mindset that we can go, I'm gonna just achieve that today, that thing, and that will be, and celebrate that small win.
Yeah.
And the consistency of it as well. Like we go back to the motor racing. What you've taken from motor racing, I guess your mindset alone into as how much that must have helped you from that challenge with your ill health.
I think so.
Consistency.
Yeah. Well, there's also a piece that we talk about quite a lot of. You have to help yourself. So the view I had was if the physio said you need, and the exercise is really hard, but if they said this is what you need to do, then you've got to help yourself, so you have to do them. Or there's no good sitting there 6 months later and going, oh, I'm not getting any better. Well, have you done the exercises? Well, no, it's ridiculous. Yeah. And I had simple stuff, sounds simple stuff. Where I live, and there's a church on a corner that serves coffee. It's not far, is it? No. I couldn't do it. So that became a goal. I wanted to get to the church and buy myself a coffee, and I literally couldn't do it. And it took a few weeks before I could get there. And when I got there, I needed a rest. I needed a coffee and a rest before I could get back. And that became. Now I can do it without. But that became. And it's you just keep going. You go, right, I'll do that. And I think if you can transfer that to business, there's lots of things that you can do if you just keep at it.
And again, one of the biggest things that come out of it, I guess, for me, is resilience. Like that.
Yeah, resilience.
I think as any business owner, any entrepreneur, anyone listening, whatever industry you're in, wherever stage you are in your life, as tough as things get, having that resilience to just get up that next day and go again.
I was talking about it to a guy yesterday, funnily enough, and we were talking about the Admirals, the Admirals film and stuff like that. But we were talking about it, the stories that you tell yourself. We invent these stories; they're not true. So we tell ourselves a story that we can't do something. It's all just this internal voice. But it's interesting to question yourself sometimes and go, is that really true, or is that something I've just made up? Because often you can't find any facts in there, so you've just made up in your mind that you can't do something, or you're not very good at it, or it's going to go this way or that, whatever it might be. We've all got these internal voices, but it's quite interesting to question those internal voices sometimes and go, why do I think that? Where's the facts? Where's the evidence? And if there aren't any, then the conversation changes a little bit, and you start to wonder whether maybe there's a different version of that.
As a guy come on one of the first series I did, there was a guy come on, Steve Salis, and he talks about self-talk and the importance of good self-talk. And he goes into schools and talks to kids about it and the importance of that, and the narrative we tell, exactly what you're saying, the narrative that we tell ourselves, and making sure that that's a positive narrative. And because actually how we are with other people sometimes, I can sit here and talk really positively about you and talk about knowledge and insights and wisdom that you've shared with us today, and how amazing. But then actually, what we tell ourselves sometimes is not always the same. People would say some nice things, have said some nice things about me, but you don't necessarily always believe them yourself, and it's so important and it helps with, like you said, we've alluded to imposter syndrome. We talked about that a little bit today, and actually getting out of that is by being confident and telling ourselves the things actually that other people would tell us, and try and believe them.
It's quite hard though, isn't it? And you can't be positive all the time. We all have good days and bad days.
100%. 100%, and it's recognising that. I think it's important. I used to see that as a really bad trait, actually. So for me, because I'm always positive, I've got a smile on my face. That's how I felt when I did have them down days. I weren't feeling 100%. Didn't feel like I was able to talk about that. So I'd have to put on this mask and not necessarily be authentic. But actually, it's okay. It doesn't mean I'm a negative person by doing that. No, it's just going, I'm having a bit of a shit day today. Yeah, and it's okay. And I might have a coffee with you, and after that coffee with you, I feel a bit better about it because we've had a chat about something, and you go, okay, and you've reframed that in your head or whatever that looks like. But if I just turned up at that meeting and weren't truthful with you and just gone, oh yeah, great, yeah, everything, then I'm positive and blah 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 blah.
But we're very British about it, aren't we? How are you? Yeah, fine. But if you ever tried saying to someone, actually, I'm a bit crap today, they don't really want to talk about it, do they?
It's getting better though. I do think that's getting better. I do think that's getting better.
And have you ever? I know I shouldn't be interviewing you, but have you ever considered sort of gut instincts? You know, sometimes you've just got a feeling about something. Have you ever thought about that and looked back on when that's happened and what decisions you've made?
In what sense?
So that's the reason I'm asking you. Is I find it really interesting. So when we ran our business, Nicole and I invariably took our decisions based on our gut instinct, and it was only I got to wondering about it one day, and I started reading about some of it. And the reason you get this gut instinct is because 80% of our communication is non-verbal. I know you and I are sitting here. I'm waving my arms around, but you're not. But we're kind of doing the verbal bit. But 80% of it's non-verbal. So and we're still just a creature, really. Rather, if we part the human bit, we're just an animal underneath. And we're picking up on all this stuff, and we don't realise it. So when you get the gut instinct, it's because you're picking up on these clues, but you haven't realised that you're kind of subconsciously picking up on it. So we used to go, let's just follow our gut instincts, and so often they were right. So often, and it fascinates me. And so I've tried since then not to ignore my gut instincts, even if it feels like the wrong decision. So and I wonder often whether people are really listening to that part of themselves and going, why do I feel uneasy about that? Often it's about a person, isn't it? There's something not quite right there. And then you find something out, don't you? Or they don't turn up, and you just kind of go, I knew they weren't going to turn up.
I've definitely I think got better at over the years. I think early on, especially in my business career, I don't think I listened to my gut enough. I think I just didn't trust myself enough. I think that comes a little bit, I believe, a bit with experience. I'd like to think wisdom maybe, but through experiences, lived experiences that you get to, because you question. And at that point, actually, if I had listened to my gut at that point, that was the right decision. And then you go, oh, actually, yeah. Then again,
and do you beat yourself up when you got the wrong decision?
No, I'm not too bad at that actually. I'm okay. Again, back to I think reframing for me. We spoke about it before, but for me, I reframed failure in my head quite early on after the salon. I lost money, sold my house, and I think from that I reframed failure because I knew that I learned so much from that, and it got me where I'm sitting here now doing a podcast and doing.
Would you change anything?
You know what? No, I wouldn't.
No.
I wouldn't.
No.
And that's one. Just before we come towards the end, I wouldn't. That's something I always ask, and I find fascinating about. I look back at your journey and your story, and that's one of the questions I ask. Is there any part of your journey, if you could go back and change any part of it, would you?
No. Nothing. Because then I wouldn't be. I like where I'm at today. I love my life. I love my job. And I'm happy in my skin. And I wouldn't be like this if I changed anything. I honestly wouldn't change anything. You know, there's some bits that were a bit crap, if I'm honest, you know, bits that are really difficult. You know, I think I'm really lucky. I've got a really good life.
And that alone, sitting here, that it's what everyone, where we all would love or want to be, happy in my skin, love what I do.
I mean, I wouldn't even change what's happened to me in the last year. And the reason for that is I don't think I could have got any closer to Nicole. We've got a great marriage, and I don't think we could ever have got any closer. But we have.
Wow.
Since this happened to me in the last year, we've got closer through it.
Wow.
So I wouldn't even change that. You know, it's been awful, of course, you know, but I wouldn't even change that because there's been such a great positive upside, you know, in terms of our relationship. You know, it's just been great, really.
Amazing.
Although parts of it I could have done without, you know.
Sure. I'm sure.
But yeah, you
But
know, I wouldn't change anything. I mean, I joined Barclays. That was a bit weird, as I said, but I had an incredible career there. And I've got a job that I really like and enjoy. So, yeah.
Well, look, that leads us so nicely on, so we're going to round up. Again, we could have just ordered lunch here. Me and you could sit here for another couple of hours, I'm sure.
No,
but we're come towards the end, and as always, looking at where you've been, where you are now, where you're going, define success for me.
Oh, I hate these sort of questions. It's so difficult, isn't it, to define success?
Because it's different for everyone, right?
It is completely different for everyone.
But for you, how do you define it?
I honestly think if you're in a space in your life that is fulfilling, which I am, then that's success. If you've got relationships with good people, that's success. And when you're gone, nobody remembers the money side. They remember who you were and the impact you had on people, not how big was Sam's business or anything like that. And we can get wrapped up in financial success, but I think that's probably a hygiene factor, i.e., have you got enough money, you know, to live and do the things you want to do. So it's much more on the human side for me. I feel very fulfilled in my life, so I think that's a success for me.
What does the future hold for you?
A few more years of doing this, I hope. So I've probably got another 5 years before they will start encouraging me to retire, and I think I'll enjoy those years. When I retire, I'd like to go on a bit of a world trip while I still can. Hopefully I'm fit and well. So we'll do that, Nicole and I, go off and see. We've seen quite a lot of the world, but there'll be more. And I want to carry on I don't drive in motor racing anymore, but I think I can add value to people there, and I get a lot of reward from doing that. So I'll probably do a bit more of that when I retire. Yeah, I won't go quietly and wither away. I'll find things to do. You know, when we're back from trotting off around the world, I think I'll still need something to do. I think it'll probably be that. I like working with young people. That's quite rewarding. I don't know. We'll see. But there'll be something. There'll be something.
Well, mate, honestly, as like I say, over the last year we've had many of these types of conversations, and I knew this would be absolute gold, and it has been. And it's been such a honour, privilege, and to get to know you.
You know, that feels weird to me now. It just feels weird. Why is it an honour and a privilege? You know, don't. It's just weird. Imposter syndrome, probably, but I don't know.
Like I say, you, for me, I mentioned it in the introduction. I think we go through life, and we do meet people that there's just an instant connection there, that, and it transcends something more than a business relationship or things like that. And that is where it's a privilege, I think, certainly on my part. And
I mean, I love having these chats. I always take stuff away from our conversations.
Just so much insights and wisdom that I've gained from it, and it's been an absolute pleasure having you on, mate. So thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you. It's been good fun.
That's as they say,
different hats.
And he's got his hat. Love that.
My Christmas hat. Different hats.
And what a perfect way to finish things off. That, as they say, is a wrap.